Hello and welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. Again, your host, Keith Weissite, licensed clinical social worker with Charitable Home Care. Very glad you're joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. And you know, we at HTV always want to bring you updates. We want to give you information on things that affect our community. Some of those things are very difficult, and I can promise you at the Lafourche Parish District Attorney's Office, they have a difficult time in the job that they do. But we want to bring in Ms. Marvin Gravois, Assistant District Attorney over at Lafourche District Attorney's Office. Thank you for joining us today, Morgan.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. And so I know that this has been an ongoing case. I know that we've been working on this for some time. Tell us a little bit about how things have progressed with David Todd and what y'all have come to know here today.
Yes, David Todd, we actually had a jury trial last week. I sat second chair on the case. It was headed by the Chief of Trials, Jason Chatney, and we came back with a guilty as charged on all 4 counts. It was a lengthy time getting him to trial, but what happens is this actually became an investigation through Terrebonne Parish. They started the investigation, learned from potential victims that some of it occurred in Lafourche Parish, and then it was transferred over to Lafourche Parish, where the sheriff's office took and did their part of the investigation and turned it over to the district attorney's office to where then we could prosecute him to get some justice for these victims.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that we talk about all the time. I can tell you we talk about, of course, District Attorney Christine Russell, about the value of being able to work with other parishes. And you've just described how important that really is to be able to identify that, you know, people don't just commit crimes in one area. They commit crimes in other areas. And we've got such wonderfully blurred lines here between Lafourche and Terrebonne that people could travel back and forth all the time. But we also see that they commit crimes in both of those parishes.
Yes.
And so this
we were able to work with the Terrebonne Sheriff's Office as well in getting our case together to present for the trial.
And so, again, we're going to put that picture up. We want to make sure that you know who we're talking about. David Todd, pictured here, age 64, was identified and found a guilty verdict on Thursday, 2 counts of aggravated incest and aggravated crime against nature and forcible rape. And so these are some difficult things to have to be able to discuss. And so it's kind of important that we make sure that we understand what that process is and making sure that we are helping with these victims and how they deal with that. You guys have such a wonderful system of really focused on the victim and finding ways to not re-traumatize them for them having to tell the story over and over and over again. We brag about that all the time with the DA.
Yes, and what they had to get on the stand and actually testify to in front of the jury is it's very personable and they're very vulnerable in doing so. And all victims did a fabulous job in testifying. There was no question that they were telling the truth. And the jury sat there and believed every single word. As unpleasant as it was for them to testify and for the jury to listen to it, the end result was a guilty verdict.
Yeah, and so when you get people whom this situation, and just for people to know, if they haven't been able to read that was what was put out, this was over several decades. This was 2 decades of abuse to people. And so it's really nice to be able to get a conviction for someone who has actually committed these heinous crimes against children, and the challenges that it creates and the victimization that it creates for them to kind of have to put their lives back together.
Yes. And the time span went back into the early 90s for these crimes.
Wow. So. And so, again, if people carry that stuff with them very often, and I'm glad that we have those both therapeutic and supportive measures in place with you guys through the DA's office. Let's talk about some of the work that's done there in making sure that we have a great deal of support for them through the DA's office.
We have a victims assistance program that will work with them throughout the whole process, as well as we have a counselor here who sits down and visits with them through whether it's trial prep or actual counseling that they need in assisting them after the trial is even over. We're not just going to finish the trial and be done with these victims. We are here for these victims.
Yeah, and again, helping people to figure out that what happened to them, first and foremost, is not their fault. Secondly, that there can be justice for some of these acts, whether people take responsibility for it or not. That was actually one of the things that was kind of mentioned in the discussion afterwards about whether the person takes responsibility of it or not. We can still make sure we provide an environment for people to recover and to heal.
Yes. And one of the victims actually released a statement after the trial, and part of it was that she said she hopes this encourages others to see that it's okay to come back years later and seek the truth and hold that person who hurt you accountable.
Yeah, and again, that's the value, as we start to wrap up here, that's the value of having a support system, having a district attorney's office who takes on these very challenging cases, but it does so not just with the legal expertise, but the emotional and the psychological support for these victims. And I appreciate that. I can tell you as a social worker, and Christine knows this, we talk about it quite often, how supportive your team is to making sure that these people have support moving forward, whether there's a guilty verdict or not, moving forward and putting their lives back together from this abuse.
Yes, and we are here to support any victims of crimes and encourage them. If you're the victim of a crime, it's not too late. Seek out the sheriff's office, seek out some help. We are here to help.
Well, you have certainly done so. And thank you so very much for your time today. We appreciate you sharing this case with us. Thank you for sitting second chair, and congratulations on getting a conviction in this case.
Thank you, sir.
All right, very good. And that will do it for this particular segment of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. Whole lot more local programming right here on HTV.